we'll be able to get started. The session is being recorded, so that I believe this will be able to be referenced later. So with that, I'll get started. Hopefully anybody that's going to join has joined. We have about 30 in the room now. So I'm going to go ahead, like I said, and get started. So welcome. My name is Kevin Kresge. I'll be working through this presentation on church marketing, kind of getting started with church marketing. I struggled with a title for this because I didn't want anybody to feel like, getting started with church marketing is a bad thing, or that it's like, it's just where we are. We always start from the beginning. So, if we haven't been through church marketing before or worked with any kind of marketing, this is going to be a good eye opener as to what is involved with communicating on behalf of your church. So the agenda for the class today, I just want to let you know a little bit more about myself. We're going to go through some terms. We're going to talk about different platforms and channels through which we can communicate with our congregations and our community. We're going to look at some different strategies for communication based on like which platform we're working on. And then some options for broadcasting worship services. We're going to talk through what that looks like. As well as some tools, some best practices, and some resources that we can reference. And then the very important piece that I want to stress here is that I have a time scheduled for question and answers at the end. So as we're working through, do me a favor. If you have a question, write it down, make note of it, and then we will get to that at the end. Once again, I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. And one of the things I've learned over the years through doing these classes is that if we take classes throughout, if we take questions throughout, a lot of times we don't get through all the materials. So I want to be able to get through everything and then be able to answer your questions as best I can. So with that, let's go ahead and move on. I just want you to know who I am. I am a licensed local pastor within the Eastern Pennsylvania Conference of the United Methodist Church. I've been in the Methodist Church. I was born into the Methodist Church. Let's put it that way. I was confirmed at Covenant United Methodist in Lancaster, downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Gosh, what feels like forever ago. I've been working in the church for probably the last 20 years. After I became a Christian in the early 2000s. And then just for the last 4 years, I've been working as a pastor at various churches within the conference. So previously I was appointed at a beautiful little country church, Burdenham United Methodist Church out in Burdenham, Pennsylvania. And I love serving there, but about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, I was moved to Hempfield United Methodist, which is very, very close to home for me, but also about 300 times the size of the congregation that I served before. I went from preaching to like 25, 30 people a week to preaching to about 800. And it was a very different experience. But of course, COVID changed everything. So we had to really modify, and our communication strategies changed quite a bit too. My history with marketing actually predates my time in the pastoral ministry. Over the last 10 years, I've worked with different companies, different advertising agencies, building websites, handling digital marketing. If you're getting ads on Facebook, that I may have put one of them up there for one of my clients. So, I actually used to work for a company called Ministry Brands, and they make church management software for churches. And if you haven't muted yet, please do so. So while I was working with them, I managed 28 different brand websites for them, and handled search engine optimization and search engine marketing for them as well. So that's a little bit about me. So let's talk about some terminology that we'll look at today. And once again, I'll be making this presentation available, as well as I believe the recording will be available after the fact. So you don't have to you shouldn't have to scramble to take like crazy notes while we're doing this. You'll have access to some of these terminology, the presentation, and some of the files after the fact. So in terms of today, I'm going to be talking about channels, tactics, content marketing. So these are some of the things we're going to define. Of course, the channel is a marketing channel. Really can reference like product distribution channels for companies, but in terms of today, what we're going to be talking is content delivery channels. So social media, email, websites, various outlets that you can send information to your congregations and your community. Tactics. If I reference tactics today, I'm going to be talking about it in terms of a strategic method that's used at promoting something that we're doing. The standard industry term is business, goods, or services, of course, but like our goods and services is Jesus. So, that's what we're going to be doing. And, any services or, events that we are going to be holding at our churches outside of, like regular worship. Content marketing is a term that is pretty standard to the industry. Um, it's basically creating content and then distributing that content through various channels. In the case of Hempfield, we do a lot of this. We create videos every day. I have a daily video that goes out every day. Pastor John, who is the head pastor here, I'm the associate pastor here at the church. He and I create videos for the church on a daily basis, and those are distributed via our social media channels as well as email and our website, along with daily devotionals. We have all kinds of stuff that goes out on a regular basis to our congregation. We have about 2,500 people that subscribe to different pieces of information from us. So that's where we're talking about content marketing. We're talking about creating content and distributing it. And then understanding rights managed versus royalty free. And this is really important when we get into content, because there is tons of stuff out there that you can use for creating content. So there's images, there's video, there's music. You want to make sure that you're working with what's called royalty free. And there are paid services where you can go in and you can actually buy the license to essentially use a piece of music, use a chunk of video, use some images. If you have the ability, create them yourself by all means. But I have some websites that I use for. I have one called Storyblocks, for example, that I may not actually reference in here. So that's one you might want to write down. But Storyblocks is relatively cheap. And it's a great place to go if you need video clips or images or, and I find it to be relatively inexpensive. I think I pay about $20 a month and I get video clips and images and all kinds of cool stuff off of there. But what you want to make sure that you're doing is adhering to copyright law and trademark law. So, grabbing, while we might find an image on Google, it may not be an image that we're allowed to use without permission of the author or without paying a fee. So the easier way to do this is to go to a royalty-free source, like, a Premium Beat, which is a great place to go for music, or a Storyblocks to be able to get video. We're going to talk about video streaming a little bit. So video streaming is a little different than just like, say, pulling up a video and playing a video back. That's going to be broadcasting a video stream live from your church or home across the wire to other people's devices. Video calls is what we're doing right now. So there's a difference between video streaming and video calls. We're doing essentially a video call right now, though. Zoom also offers, of course, we're in Zoom. Zoom also offers a webinar option where, like, if you're seeing the screen share, but you're also seeing the little block with all the faces in it, like you got the Brady Bunch view going on. The webinar version of this allows you to have way more people attend, like up to 100 people. But they can't participate and interact like we can on the video. So, like, there are different modes of this. So there's video calls and video conferencing, which is this, and then there's also webinars. And I've actually used webinars for classes for the church as well as Zoom calls. So we'll get into some of how I use that. And then, of course, webinars. I kind of spoiled my own last point there, talking about that, but. It basically allows for a small group of presenters, like one or two, maybe four. You can have a group of people, like a panel, present to a large audience. And then basically, like, in that interaction, you would have the ability. Well, honestly, perfect example of the webinar. If you attended annual conference this year, that was a webinar, because the most interaction you could do was chat and ask questions. At no time really could, unless somebody promoted you to, like, give you the ability to unmute, were you able to actually, like, directly interact with the presenters, short of asking questions. So that was very much the webinar thing. So once again, I'm Kevin, as those that may still be joining. I'm the associate pastor at Hempfield. I'm also the director of online ministries. So a lot of what you'll see today is what we do here. I have the advantage in a sense of having a team of people who help me with communications. So like I don't have to manage all of this, but I do manage quite a bit of it. So let's start talking about platforms and channels. So this is where we get into some of that terminology, and we're going to start with social media. So social media is really, really vital, honestly, anymore to church communication, because if you look at app usage on the average person's phone, I imagine if you even looked at it on your own phone, Facebook probably spends a lot of time on there. Instagram, probably a lot of time. Twitter, maybe too. But depending on generational, where like our age groups, those platforms change. Like my son, for example, he's 15. He spends a whole lot of time. Well, I limit his usage pretty hard. He doesn't get access to a lot of the stuff. He doesn't have he has an Instagram account, and I get to see what I get a mirrored version of that account, so I get to watch what he's doing and posting and sending. So, but as you know, that way I can keep track of it, because I remember myself at 15, and well, yeah. So, but what we want to make sure that we're doing is using the correct platform and using the correct channel to communicate to our communities, because that's where they are. But we also want to make sure that we're using the right ones to make sure that we're speaking to the people that we want to speak to. Like, for example, if I want to speak to the folks who attend our traditional service at 8:30 on a Sunday morning, like I'm not going to hop on Snapchat and send out a message via Snapchat, because that's not a channel that they're using. However, I've discovered many of them are on Facebook. So from an age group perspective, I know that I will be able to reach them frequently by sending an email or by creating a post on Facebook. And that way I know that they're going to see it, or they also check our church website. So we'll get into how basically creating content and then distributing it across all channels is very important to what we're doing. The next channel that we want to look at is is email. So email, of course, is one of those channels that I think we understand that we have to use. There are churches I'm aware of that are they'll send out they'll actually have somebody send out a Word doc as a newsletter, and I'm not making fun, right? So this is just what they do, and they'll CC everybody on their distribution list openly, so everybody sees everybody else's email address and name. And I'll get, I have some churches that I've worked with in the past where I subscribe to their news, and like I still get that every once in a while. And that's not how we want to be sending email. The better way by far to send email is by using a platform that's designed to send email, like a MailChimp or a Constant Contact. And the beautiful part here is that most of these, in terms of the number of people we're going to be emailing, are free, because they have a cap at which you start having to pay, and most of us aren't going to go over that cap. Or unless there's also advanced functionality that we might want to have to pay for. In this case, like Sendinblue, for example, supports SMS texting as well. So like if you wanted to distribute a message by text, you could, but adding that module and using that module costs, I think, $10 a month. So there are options out there, but emails, from a strategy perspective, should always be short, very to the point, direct, and guide someone who's getting that email to the course of action or thing that you want them to do. Like if you want them to download something, or if you want them to view a newsletter, the point of an email is to be short, direct, concise, get them to do what you want them to do, and then that's it. Because have you ever noticed that you typically only read like maybe the top paragraph of an email? And how many times have you had somebody come back to you and say, well, did you see what I said further down? And you're like, well, no, I didn't actually read that far. I do this all the time, because if somebody writes me a lengthy email, I read the top to get the gist of it and go, oh yeah, that. Meanwhile, they'll attach some other important point way down at the bottom. And I have to admit, I don't catch it, because, well, I'm not reading a novel, I'm reading an email. And so we have to think about email in that way. Continuing with emails. What emails should we send, and to whom should we send them? Regular church announcements, special announcements. We want to make sure that anybody that's in our church database is getting that, if they're signed up to get them, of course, because if we're using an email platform, they have to opt in. Otherwise, we're spamming them, and we don't want to be doing that. So they're through the setup process of using one of those email platforms, there's a whole thing on how to approve that they've given you permission to email them and all that. You can upload all that. We're not going to get into that today. But mostly we want to make sure that the people who should, which is everybody, get church news and special announcements. Like, say, for example, we just updated our COVID-19 protocols here at the church. Previously, we had been taking temperatures and asking people the 3 questions like you get at the doctor's office. Every Sunday morning, anytime you come to the church, you had to answer those questions and you had to take your temperature, right? Our church council met the other night, and with the numbers dropping and, the governor rescinding the travel restrictions, we decided that, that we're going to not take temps and ask the questions anymore. We still have everything posted, and we let people know at the same time, masks are still required and you still have to social distance when you're in the building, right? So, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure that everybody got that news. So we emailed that out, as a special announcement. If you have a weekly or a monthly newsletter, allow people to sign up for these. Don't just attach them to it, but you can promote it. And then what we send out through the church is a weekly update. If you're not muted, please, if you could do me a favor and mute. I unfortunately don't have host capability, so I have to just kind of ask us all to be doing that. Okay. So anyway, hey Sue, can you mute, please? Okay. Hey, Sue, can you mute, please? I'm getting. Not you. Sue Grim Maddox is on. Sorry. Sue Grim Maddox, can you please mute your phone? Oh my. Okay. And then there's one. Hold on one second. I'm going to try chatting her.
Meantime, Kevin, I got here.
Okay.
I always keep the volunteer so I can send them a note. And I'll be in here for Mario. Karen will be here.
Okay, I don't know that she can hear me, but I've chatted her and hopefully she'll hear that I'm asking her to mute. So anyway, let's continue. We'll try anyway. Anyway, okay. Oh boy. Sue Grim Maddox. Sue Grim Maddox. Can you hear me? Can you please mute your phone?
Can. Hi.
Can you please mute your phone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Anyway, so back into it. So other regular communication, like I said, we do have people that'll sign up. We have sign up forms on our website where people can choose what they want to receive. So something like a daily devotional. We also have our daily videos that go out via email so people can get notifications that they've been published. So those we ask people to sign up for. We don't just sign them up for them. So like that's one of those things that you can consider. If somebody wants to receive more regular communication, let them sign up for it. And the reason for that is if you over communicate, they'll unsubscribe and then you lose them altogether. So you don't want to spam them. You want them to opt in. So there's some strategies that we're going to talk about there in a little bit. And then finally, from a channel perspective, a website, super important piece of church communication. It is the central hub where you can drive traffic so that people can learn about what's going on at your church. All of the information that you're communicating out by email, social media, etc., will either also be here or you will be using those channels to drive people to your website to learn about it. So ultimately, this is where you would want people to go to read about it, or you want the information to at least be there. So if they didn't get the email, we all know how it is in the church anyway. You can tell them 6 times, you can announce it every week for a month, you can put it in the newsletter, you can put it on the screen, and somebody will still say, well, I never heard about that. You know, we all know how it is. And so, you know, we just want to make sure though that we have a place where they can go and get the information. So some of the things we have to consider though about our websites is making sure that we're not falling into some of the traps or common issues with websites. Like for example, we get, within the we have like a free service where you can get, I think, a WordPress hosted website for like $5 a month. And that's nice, and it certainly fits into the church budget. But what you'll find out is that it runs very slowly because of the hosting that the website runs on. It runs very slowly. And then you're also limited in the number of things that you can install on that website as far as functionality, because, you know, there's stuff that we're going to want to be able to communicate. Like, do you want to put an event calendar on there? Do you want to have, you know, the ability to have people sign up for your newsletter? Like, some of those things require a level of access that those cheap or free plans will not let you do. So considering things like slow hosting, or a lot of times I've worked with a couple of churches in the past where somebody had created a website for the church in the past and had been completely abandoned. They created a new church website on a different domain name, but the old website was still up. And so when you searched for that church, guess which one showed up? The old one, just because it had been out there longer. And that's the one that, but so we had to work to try and get that website taken down, or at least take over that domain name so we could point it back over to the new one. So the other thing here, and I love to quote scripture every once in a while, but we got to remember the labor is worthy of their hire. If you're gonna have somebody build a website for you, consider the fact that websites aren't really cheap, unless you have somebody in your church that, you know, knows how to build a website and they're willing to donate that time and manage it. You know, but you should be willing to invest. Consider this like part of your building. It's almost like a capital expense for the church, really, because it's essentially a virtual building for the church, and you know, it's something that you got to consider making a sound investment in. So let's talk communication strategy. You don't want to start communicate. Well, I mean, obviously we're already communicating, but if you want to employ a lot of these new things, you don't want to just jump into doing this without thinking about how you want to do it first. And there's some questions that you need to ask yourself before you get started. First and foremost, who is my audience, right? Who am I reaching out to? Depending on where your church is, like when my church was in Lancaster, I had like a 1/4 mile radius that I would work inside of, because in the city there, you know, there's a church literally, I mean, it's almost a church on every corner in Lancaster. I mean, so, however, my church there, we were unique in that in the northwest quadrant of the city, we were pretty much the only Methodist church. So we weren't like button heads with other Methodist churches in that sector. So like when I was mapping out our reach, and like, you know, we wanted to talk to people who were within walking distance of the building. So like inside of a 10-minute walk, we did the math on all that. How far a 10-minute walk would take, how far out a 10-minute walk would put people. And inside that window, we were able to establish who we were speaking to. And by that, I mean, like, there are tools that we have that show us demographics info and like who we're out, who we're going to be able to talk to inside of that radius. And we have access to those. One of them is called Mission Insight. That'll show us inside of that radius who it is we're going to be talking to, and like how, and then we can start thinking about how we want to reach out to them. Like, what's the best way to do that? We also want to think about what it is we're going to be communicating to those groups. Additionally, we want to make sure what it is we're going to be wanting them to do. So for example, if we're going to be hosting an event, I'm going to have somebody come in, or I might have a music group come in. I'm going to want to communicate, what do I want them to do? Well, I want them to sign up. I want them to register. I want to know that they're coming. So now I'm starting to put a strategy together as I think about what it is we're going to be doing. And then ultimately, I think about what platforms and channels I should use. So when I'm looking back at that information that I got from before, my own membership that might be inside of that area, as well as other people that may not be members of the church or attend the church I'm going to be reaching out to, what platforms and systems are they going to be using that I might be able to reach them on? And, a lot of times we'd be surprised. This is where a lot of that cool demographic information comes into play. You can see, depending on who the research firm was that put the information together, where they stand on like a technology adoption curve inside of that geographic footprint. So like, you might think, oh, well, it's this area, they're probably not going to have cell phones, or they won't have internet access or something like that. It's actually wrong. A lot of times that information is, our thoughts on that have been completely upside down, where, technology adoption is actually ahead of the technology adoption curve. And they're already on all the platforms that we didn't think that they were. So like, we can at that point then intelligently choose where we want to communicate these messages out and say like, okay, but these are all the questions that you want to ask before you get into that. Thinking about how we want to communicate it then, effective communications always includes these things. You want to have a good, strong, bold headline. In the case of an email, it's an inspiring or inviting subject line that makes somebody want to open it. If you just have an email that says newsletter, I don't exactly want to open that. Like if I have a newsletter though, that the subject line of that newsletter is, here's the latest weekly news from, Hempfield UMC, check out the latest news. Having a call to action in the headline invites somebody to open the email. It works a lot better. You end up getting a much higher open rate as a result of, having that catchier headline, and it's less spammy too. The next thing is a strong call to action. You want to make sure that in any communication you have, you're telling people where to go and what to do. You'd be amazed. This is something I discovered in, you ever see those display ads, right, on your phone or on the computer, and down in the one corner, it'll say click here, right? If you've ever clicked on one of those, where on the ad did you click? Did you click on the ad itself, or did you click where it said click here? I'm going to put money on the fact that you probably clicked on what looked like a button, because that's what I see when I'm looking at the analytics on how people use what I'm doing, is that 9 times out of 10, they'll click on the button rather than on a text link. They'll, it's what's visibly the call to action. They'll click on that. They'll use that. So having a good, strong call to action, other terms that you would want to use, get, take, now, like very immediate actions, those should be part of what you're doing. Sign up now, right? Or get tickets, or apply now. Like you always want to have some kind of strong immediacy to that call to action. And then once again, we're back to like making sure that you have images or video. Big thing, man. If you have images in there, if you have images on your social media posts associated with your with the content on your website or whatever, make sure that they're royalty free and that you've paid for the licensing if you need it, or you can take images yourself, right? Like one of the images that I use for the opening and closing of our daily videos on our Facebook page and the website, it's a picture that I took from the parking lot of the steeple of the church with the nice clear blue sky behind it. It's a really pretty picture. But that's how that works. And then you want to consider using a communication plan to kind of help organize all the details, get all the information correct. So if somebody's going to be running an event for you, then having a communication plan is really a good thing to do, because it's going to make it a lot easier to make sure that you have all the details sorted out before you start communicating about the actual event. And I have an example that let me pull up here. I just have to stop the share for a minute, and I'm going to pull up this communication plan so you can see it. Share and screen. There it is. Okay, so it might be a little tough to see, and I can zoom in a bit. Here we go. Wow, that was a lot. But this is essentially a communication plan that is filled out for my communications person. If somebody comes through the church website, they fill this out on a form on the website to submit information. So this powers any emails that go out, our bulletin announcements when we still had bulletins, right? Because we may not be doing printed bulletins anymore. We haven't done a printed bulletin in over a year at this point. Beyond that, was the event approved? Did it have to go through somebody? Did we reserve the room in our system if it needs to be? Do we have childcare? We're going to offer childcare. These are all the things that you want to make sure that you've thought about, and having a checklist like this basically helps you organize all of that and make it much easier to put the communication together. It practically writes itself when it's time to actually put the email together and send it, or put the social media post together and send it. It all but writes itself. So this makes it much easier. And I have this file in the folder that I'll send out later. So this will be accessible as a PDF to you later. So you'll be able to take a look at that. But do we need the questions that we ask are like, do we need a bulletin insert for it? Do we need a sign outside? Do I have to run a paid ad? The questions are all there. And what what does the description look like for the event, right? So, you know, these are all the questions that we'll want to ask and answer as part of that communication plan. So continuing on, the other thing that we want to look at that I don't really have a sample of, because every time I've worked with the content calendar, it's been something that I've recreated every time because the situation changes as far as how it needs to be built. But what a content calendar is it's another way to organize post information that you're going to be putting together throughout the year. So like one of the things that I've used as part of a content calendar, like overarching themes, overarching theme for like a day, week, or month of the year. For example, we've got Holy Week coming up. So inside of Holy Week, I have social media posts, and our daily devotionals are all driven around scripture and aspects of Holy Week. So that's all mapped out for us. So the content, when we go to write it, is we know what scripture passages it's going to be based on. We know, you know, thematically where it's going to be. It's very similar in a sense to the document that John and I use to plan out our sermon series for the year as we're going. So like we know what scripture we're going to do, what sermon titles are, what themes we want to do, what our 3 points are, like what's the ultimate takeaway we want to have. Like we map all that out as part of this content calendar for our sermons, but we also do that for our communication. After that, we determine, you know, like what the ideas are going to be, what are important terms and keywords that we want to include, and then certainly what the ideal platforms are for the communication that we want to send. Done properly, this can really, really help you keep the communications organized. And really what the ultimate goal here being, you don't want to have your communications being rushed or hurried or going out too often to people who only signed up really for like a weekly email or a monthly newsletter. If you're beating them up with emails every day, 9 times out of 10, after 3 days of that, they're going to unsubscribe and you lose them completely. At that point, you don't get them back. So it's better to, you know, have it all mapped out and know what your plans are going to be. So that's content calendar is a good thing to have. But let's talk about broadcasting worship now. If you're going to be streaming your worship services, there's things that you're going to want to consider. So first and foremost, how fast is the internet connection that you have? Faster the better is really what it works out to. If you're trying to do a broadcast worship service over DSL, or if you're trying to do it over like you know, a slower connection, it's really not going to work out too well. Wi-Fi hotspots are not a good choice for, you know, live streaming a service, because you know, the network gets loaded, and as a result, or you might lose the tower or switch towers in the middle of your service. You know, other things that can happen is they can buffer you. Even if you're on an unlimited data plan, they can actually say, oh, well, you've used, you know, too much data already this month, so now we're going to downgrade your service. Even though you still get the data, you can only go so fast. So having a good solid internet connection is definitely a good idea. And then you have to consider what technology you're going to use. Certainly you can live stream a service off of a phone. I know plenty of people who do that. You know, there are quite a few churches in our conference who will set their phone on a tripod and run their live stream right off their phone. And that goes right onto Facebook. So they've determined that that's the platform that they want to use. The challenge with using just a phone, for example, is that you're limited to where all of that, like all the places that service can be displayed. We'll get into that here in a little bit, because if you use like hardware or software and a streaming service, it's possible to actually live broadcast your service to like almost an unlimited number of places at the same time. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Webcams are certainly a good option. The webcam that I'm using right now is a 4K webcam. It's actually a really high quality webcam that I was able to buy both, you know, to support not only my business, but also for use here at the church. But it's the Logitech Brio webcam. I wouldn't use the microphone inside of it. I'll tell you that. The microphone I'm using is actually a desktop microphone made by a company called AKG. You get much better audio off of that than you do off of the webcam. So if I switch to that audio source, you'll hear a distinct difference. But having a good webcam makes all the difference in the quality of the service that people are going to experience. And you can have more than one. That's the other thing, is as you look at different technology and different options, you can have more than one webcam. And then considering either streaming hardware or software and having a computer, and then adding additional cameras. The other thing that you have to make sure that you're on top of is your licensing, right? A lot of churches that I had served in the past, this wasn't really something that we thought about, because it wasn't something that we, just really considered. But we're responsible to report song usage, even out of the hymnal, via CCLI. Like, we actually are supposed to be doing that. There's a licensing fee that's paid. Beyond that, there's also a video license that allows us to show video clips and certain things. But there's also a streaming component to these licenses. And like, it's funny, man, my dad is actually also a UM pastor. He's a pastor down in the south at a little church down in the south end of Lancaster County. But he's way more expert on the licensing side of stuff than I am. But I'd love to have him on here to talk about it. But there are important things to note. Is you want to make sure that if you're going to use videos that you need licensing for, having the CCLI and CVLI licenses, as well as the web streaming components of those licenses, is super important. The other thing to consider is, if you're going to stream music from your worship services, having the ability to display the CCLI number of the song or the hymn on the screen is something that certain platforms require to prevent you from having your audio cut for a copyright strike violation, right? So like Facebook, for example, if they hear that you're using what would be considered copyrighted music and you don't have any licensing information actually written on the screen, like subtitled on the screen, they can actually mute the stream and bring the audio back once the song is over. We've had it happen to us. But I will say this, it absolutely wrecks the audio for the rest of the service. It totally gets it out of sync and messes it up. So making sure that you got your licensing info on there, super important. And then the other consideration is, of course, who will run it all? This is the eternal question in the church, amen? Like, who's going to do it? And it's basically coming down to finding somebody who you can trust, who is reliable, and understands the technology, or at least is willing to learn, so that they can manage it. Other considerations there. If you're broadcasting, basic strategy that'll work well for you, right? Fair to good internet connection. The faster, the better. I mentioned that before. Having one or two cameras, basic webcams can work. One of the churches that I was working with, Rules United Methodist up in outside of Manheim, PA, like northern end of Lancaster County. I helped them get some stuff set up. They have a couple of the cheaper Logitech webcams. I think they're like $60, $70 a piece. Then they have an audio feed that comes in off of their soundboard. So their whole service, they switch back and forth between the cameras. They also have the lyrics that they display off the computer, and then they're pulling the audio in from the soundboard. So what you get is actually pretty clean sound and some variation on that. And I think the whole thing cost them a used computer that they got for free and a couple $100 in webcams. And then the software that they use, called OBS, that's a good piece of software right there. It's completely free. You can install that and manage a live stream to multiple platforms right off of there. And then making sure that you have good sound. And then really the question comes down to, where will you be streaming the service? So let's take a look at some ideas there. So if you're broadcasting, knowing your audience can make a big difference on where you stream, right? Older demographic, so say 45 plus, you're going to catch them on Facebook or on your website. Younger demographics, you'd be surprised, you'll actually catch them on YouTube more than you will on, say, Facebook or Instagram when it comes to live streaming video. So let's say I want to be able to reach both at the same time. Well, if I'm using like a source like OBS, vanilla OBS, I can only stream to one platform. Like I have to choose a platform to stream to. Or I can look at a streaming service that will handle the distribution of that video for me. So like I can send that communication out to a platform like Vimeo Pro is one that we use. I think it's a marginal cost. In fact, last year at the beginning of COVID, they made it completely free for churches to use for like the year at the time. So we got on board with that. So what we do is we stream our video. I'll show you this. We stream our video out to Vimeo Pro. And then I've configured Vimeo Pro. Well, I haven't, my tech guy has. What he does is we have this set up that it at the same time will send our video from the church to our website as a plugin on our live worship page. It'll send it to Facebook, YouTube, and then any other video service. Like there are tons of other video services like Rumble and a couple others where you can actually send live video feeds to. If they use the RTMP protocol, you can configure a feed to send video to it. That's a little on the technical side, but just know that it is possible to actually send your videos more places than just one place at a time. So if you're going to set it up, this is how you can do it. And it's something to consider. It's a relatively low cost on top of the other stuff, but it's worth it if you want to make sure that you're reaching people where they are. I always think of that quote from the Apostle Paul, like, I will be all things to all people, if only to reach a few, right? I want to make sure that if I need to be a tent maker, I'm going to be a tent maker. So if I want to get my message in front of the people that I want to get it in front of, I need to consider where they are. And one of the places where they are is YouTube, maybe not Facebook. I want to make sure, though, that I don't lose the people from Facebook or my website. So how do I do that? This is how I do that. And now let's talk about some tools and best practices. So for measuring traffic on your website, there are multiple tools that you'll want to configure to make sure that people can not only find your church on Google, but they will also be able to find your website and make sure that your website is working well. And these are all free from Google. So Google Analytics, Google Search Console, and there's another one called Google My Business. And the Google My Business platform ties directly into Google Maps. So what information you plug into Google My Business is what will power the information on Google Maps. For example, if you search for a location like on your phone in Google Maps, the images that you get are actually that you might see when you look at it on your phone. The images that you get there are actually coming off of that Google My Business platform. So you can give people virtual tours of your church. You can upload event images. You can add images from like different views of the outside. Like say, for example, Google Street View can be great, and it can also be pretty terrible if somebody's trying to find your building. Having the right image as far as what people should be looking for. Like I remember, basically when it shows an image of our church, it shows right by the door, but that's not what it looks like when you're coming in off of like the main street. So what I want to do is I upload an image that has a picture of the church from the entrance at the street so that people know that they're turning into the right place, right? So like this is one of those things that you can consider. And then as far as the website platform itself, building the website on WordPress, honestly, it's one of the easiest platforms to work with. The software itself, the website software itself is free. It's relatively easy to configure. And honestly, I recommend that you work with somebody to help build it. And then, of course, I threw a little quote down here that is a quote that I've said to clients. Websites are like a house, or they're like a building, really. Without a good architect, it'll look as good and be as easy to navigate as the Winchester Mansion. And if you're familiar with the Winchester Mansion at all, you'll know that it is not at all. I mean, there's doorways that go to nowhere. They open into a wall. There's staircases that start halfway up a wall that you can't actually get to. There's, hallways that go to nothing. Like you literally go down the hall and there's nothing there. Websites can be like that if you don't consider working with somebody who like knows how to put information together and organize information into ways that people will be able to find it easy. So work with somebody to help you build that website. There are plenty of people who work with nonprofits like churches and others that will help build websites, or at least help get started on a website, like help coming up with a plan. For email, my recommendations for churches are always going to be MailChimp and Constant Contact for an email platform. It's okay if you're using another one, but I personally like these two because their limits are higher as far as when they go from being free to being a paid platform, depending on the number of people that you have in your contact database. Social media, obviously we've got all the platforms, right? So Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, you've got Instagram, you've got all the different platforms. Managing them sometimes is not easy. And there's a lot that you can do by using a platform like Hootsuite or Sprout Social to manage those platforms and allow you to create a post and then have it distributed, or you can schedule your posts and have them show up, when you want. And then certainly talking about tracking your congregation. And I'm not mean like sneaky tracking. I'm talking just like keeping their information organized and knowing who they are and where they live and all that. Having good church management software. And I'm not saying that just because I used to work for a church management software company. The one we use here, I'm not a huge fan of. We use Planning Center, but I mean, I use that to plan our worship services right now. We use every component of it. There's an event calendar, there's signups, registrations, there's check-ins for the children's program. Like, we use all of that stuff. But having a good church management software that you can keep track of your people's information so that you can follow up with them by different channels like phone, email, social media. Additionally, having an event management system where you can create events and have people register. And then certainly there are other systems that are out there where you can upload your church info and see it all on a map and take a look at some demographics. And I wanted to show you some examples of that here. So I'm going to stop that share. I'm going to pull up another screen that has this on it. It's actually the one that had the, here we go. So inside of, I couldn't get into Mission Insight today to show you the Mission Insight. For some reason, it was telling me I didn't have access, but this is another tool that I've used. It's powered off of Barna Research. And if you're familiar with the Barna name, Barna is a church, like these guys basically specialize in church research and data. And so they're using US Census data, and they're also using, they're also using their own research that they've done. And so I can take a look at, I can register. There's a free aspect to this that you can use where, and this is called Gloo, Gloo. But I can look at, basic demographic breakdowns, issues that might be prevalent in my community. They actually have logged on here. We actually have a higher risk of opioid dependency in this geography within 5 miles of the church. So we've done actually ministry outreaches on drug dependency and opioid addiction. And we've actually gotten some really great attendance from families in the community because it was a perceived need that honestly we wouldn't really have considered had we not looked over this data and said like, oh, this is going to be a thing. And then, we get an idea of like where people at, then you can dig in a little bit more. You can look at generational breakdown, where we are in our community versus national average. And then one other thing to note is that if I'm looking at this, I see I've got, a pretty a line. I'm pretty much along with the curve here as far as nationally. But then if I go over to my church data and I look at the breakdown inside my church management software and I see where I'm at on an age curve and what our breakdown is between, like professing members and that kind of stuff. What I can see here is my curve on the church information as far as people that have attended and given us their info doesn't really match my community curve. So there's an interesting thing for me to know that I'm not reaching right now a chunk of the community, a good sized chunk of the community in the Gen X and like lower boomer range. They aren't attending this church because I can see that I've got a gap in there where here there's actually a bit of a bump, but I've got the reverse on my church membership info. So I know that I need to be doing a better job. This at least reveals a gap for me. Like I know within 5 miles of the church, there's plenty of people that I can be reaching out to that aren't currently, looking at our church or attending our church. And then you can see other information like how long they've lived in the area,
Surely.
racial makeup of the community, so that you know who you're talking to that way. Community versus national average, as far as even the faith community, where they stand on faith. And I've used this software. You can actually send out surveys with this software as well. I've got some survey data we can take a look where you can actually send out a survey to your congregation and get information back from them, like where they stand on certain issues. I'll show you one of the surveys we did. But where they stand on, faith beliefs, like we trend obviously more traditional in this community than the national average. It's a lot of farms and whatnot out near the church, at least used to be. Now it's getting more and more developed. And then seeker versus, national average is actually a little bit lower. But then you get some interesting insight into.
Yes, I need to get some thyroid medicine for my cat.
Okay. Hey, William, can you mute, please?
Hayland. Gilderoy.
All right. So,
did I do that?
okay. So we can also look at the faith breakdown of the community and see that we're primarily Protestant area. There are some larger Catholic dioceses in the area where like we kind of share the space. But you can also see that there's some other ones. And then when you get into the family, there's some good family information here. This is not stuff you will find inside of Mission Insight, just so you're aware. Mission Insight does not have all of this. There is U.S. Census data that's there, but here was another one where we saw this one, that we had a 16% risk in our community of marital issues. So we've been also very active about holding marriage workshops and seminars here at the church. So that's, we see a perceived need through the data here in the community and we attempt to meet it. It kind of helps us out. And then, average ages of children in our area. And then we can look at financial situation in the community to see where people are, household debt on average, and then discretionary income, where they stand. And then also, where people are as far as, education. There are also some surveys that they've done to actually look at, where people stand as far as health. There are, this is Glue. I see people are messaging me about this. It's called Glue. It's GLOO. So yeah, chronic pain, is a thing. Mental health.
Okay.
We're a little bit above average on mental health, anxiety, and depression, but not much. So these are things that it's great software to take a look at as far as that goes. And like I said, this is free. It's gloo.us is where you want to go to take a look at that. I couldn't get into, like I said, I couldn't get into Mission Insight. There are demographics reports inside of Mission Insight. Let me take a look at, I did some assessments with this so I could show you what we've got there. Okay, here's one that got filled out. This was April, May of 2020. And what we did was we asked we were asking the congregation about where they stood on how they were feeling as far as, COVID and all that. We had questions in there on their health, faith. Basically, we wanted to check in on the congregation and see how they were doing. And, there were pointed questions in there as far as how they felt about the church, where we could be meeting the needs of the congregation there. These are also included in the Glue app. You can actually send these out. You can make modifications, but there's some great questions in here that you get answers to, like finding out where whether or not you really do have children in your congregation or not, right? In our case, 70%, the kids were grown and were out of the house. And that matches our church data that we could see over here for sure. And because certainly they weren't attending the church. So we know that they aren't there, right? And that this survey confirmed that data for us. So these are just some of the things inside of that system that you can look at. Additionally, this information can help you target, and we'll get into targeting in the next session. If you're carrying over for the next session, we're going to be looking at how we can target that data and use it to set up advertising on platforms like Facebook and Google, and what that looks like to be able to like create an audience so that you know who you're reaching out to. And that way your ads are more effective and you're reaching people more effectively there. So let's see. What do we got? I need to jump back over to my presentation now. Sorry about that. I'm talking to myself and reminding myself what I need to do. We all do it. All right. And so I wanted to take you on a walk through that stuff. As far as other best practices that you can employ, if you have open Wi-Fi in your church, talk to somebody about helping you implement an acceptable use policy for your network. We have one for both our staff, and if you use our guest network, there's an acceptable use policy that will actually pop up on your phone, and you have to hit yes, I accept that to be able to use it. It's just like if you go to like Dunkin' Donuts or Panera or whatever, and you get on their Wi-Fi, there's one you have to accept. Implementing a social media policy. I actually have an example of a social media policy that we just recently updated. It's in our personnel manual. Where is it at? I had it open. There we go. We just updated our social media policy, and this is part of our personnel manual. But basically, we had to add some stuff because, well, some things took place on social media with some of our staff, and we had to address it. And basically, what we're doing here is reminding people that regardless of where you are, you don't make comments about other employees of the church or members of the church or anybody that attends the church based on anything. And we had to make that clear, which is kind of sad. But having this protects the church if you have to dismiss somebody from your staff, or even potentially having to, like, we all know that uncomfortable situation of potentially having to fire a volunteer. Ultimately, what it comes down to is that, they are, even though they're not an official spokesperson for the church, they're still a representative of the church. And we want them to, conduct themselves accordingly. And so that's what we ask. And that's part of a good social media policy. And then by all means, make sure that you're tying that into your safe sanctuary policy as well. You should absolutely have a social media component in your safe sanctuary policy. None of your church leaders, your elder church leaders, or even your younger church leaders, if you have a youth director, whatever, none of them should be directly connected to any of the youth of the church or an at-risk adult on social media, and having private communications with them across those channels. 100%. Like, that should be part of your safe sanctuary policy. You want to make sure that you're keeping people safe across all levels of communication. In fact, we know, based on just recent history, that social media can be just as damaging, if not more, because we often feel untethered as far as how we'll interact with others on social media rather than we would in person. And then additional things that you can do to protect yourself in the church or just make your life easier, because if you're a pastor that's trying to do everything, been there. And I know how that feels. And if you can hire someone or get a volunteer that you can trust. Obviously, it's got to be somebody that you can trust to handle these things. And then keep them accountable and respect their time. And by keep them accountable, I mean the best thing that you can do is, if you're using these communication strategies and communications plans, have regular meetings with them, schedule the time to get the things updated, produce the communications, get everything written. And make sure that they have clear instructions and that you're setting clear expectations. One of the biggest things that I've run into in churches that I've served, not as a pastor in the past, but just as either a volunteer or even when I was working as a worship leader for a couple of years at my old church in the city, having clear instructions and having open lines of communication is vital to that role. So, you just want to make sure that you've, check those boxes. It's just, pieces of advice of things that I've seen over the years that can make your life easier and protect the church. All right. So I know I blew through that, but I got to respect our time. It is 10 o'clock. So we're going to have a short break coming up here soon. And our next session starts at 10:30. So I want to give everybody a bio break. If you're coming back or you're getting ready for your next session. So I'm hoping for about a 15-minute Q&A session. So at this point, if you would like to unmute, if you're not already unmuted, please do so and fire away, man. I'm here to answer your questions.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey.
Good morning. Thanks for the information. Good so far. Interesting. I'm up in the frozen north section of the North District, way up
Okay.
north here.
I'm headed your way next weekend. I'm going to the Poconos for the weekend.
Well, good luck getting up here.
Yeah, I hear that.
I have written down several questions, but
Okay.
mainly, are you going to make available all your slides and all these, your presentation in a
Yep.
written format to us? Everybody that's been registered for the session?
Yeah, you'll get this presentation as it sits, and then I have some sample files that you'll get as well.
Okay, and then you had some, I'm really interested in some of the websites and other places that you had mentioned on here.
Okay.
So are you going to include that, like the information for the CCLI and the CVLI and?
Yes. I mean, there is a ccli.gov, I think is where it's at. But I mean, like the CCLI licensing is done through, it's literally an organization. So like they have like, if I don't want to be that guy, I'll include the links, but
That's what I
honestly,
mean, including all the links and that contact information so I can reach out to these people like the Vimeo Pro.
Yeah.
We're doing streaming now. We got lucky.
okay.
A couple of months ago. There's a guy in the community here, there's a small town north of us that's got a gaming store, online
Okay.
gaming store. And he reached out to us to provide the streaming services to it.
Awesome.
So he could use his people to teach them how to do streaming and also using our church and our services. So that was
Awesome.
great. So we're doing, yeah. But eventually we may have to just move to a single camera. I don't know if we can, but anyway. And then the demographic information, will that be included? The links there, will that be included?
Yeah, that'll be in the documentation as well.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Kevin,
Yes.
I have several questions too.
Okay.
Is there some place we can go to get information or how to use this CCLI? See, we have the license and we got the paid for the live streaming,
Okay.
but I didn't know anything about reporting the numbers and posting the numbers as captions or something.
Right.
Is there some way we can get this information? That's question one. Question two is, this whole program you're putting on now, will we be able to get that in a way that we can replay it and pause it and discuss it? Because I'm the
Yes.
only one from my church here, and I'm like maybe one of the least involved in this stuff.
Okay.
So how do we do that?
Right. So the way you do that is give me just 1 second here. Sorry, I'm dealing with another issue.
Okay.
Just for a moment. And it looks like I was able to get that dealt with.
Oh,
All right, there we go. I got it dealt with. Okay,
I-
sorry. So yes,
Another
the-
part of that question is I'm told that Rumble isn't so worried about song copyrights and things.
yeah, it's not the best platform as far as that's concerned. They aren't very strict about it. But if you're going to stream to the more common platforms like Facebook and YouTube, you making sure that you're on point with displaying your copyright information is definitely important. That should be well, it's something you're going to need to consider. And so yes, the recording of this will be available later for people to see, and I'm sure that the conference will be sending out a list with links to the recordings.
Okay.
You'll be able to, I believe, either download the recording or at least be able to watch it online and then pause it and play. So
It will be on EPA's, on the website, Kevin. They said by Tuesday.
well, there you go. Thank you, Sue.
Could I follow up?
I apologize
Kevin?
to everyone.
Oh,
Hello, Kevin?
Question about, in terms of licensing,
Yes.
is there any difference in how we treat the licensing, whether you're in person, whether you're only Zoom, whether you're recording it and restreaming it? Are there any
Okay.
differences in each of those levels?
So you mentioned one thing that set off a red flag right there, and recording and redistribution is a no-no when it comes to music. So you cannot do that, at least not inside the terms of the licensing. Facebook will hold on to videos on there as part of the platform, but because it was streamed live in that case, that's okay. As long as you're not like recording it in-house and then distributing it later, that's not as big of a problem. I know like one of the things that my and this is where I would love to have my dad on here, but he's actually on another Zoom call on my other computer right now. He's an expert with the licensing stuff as far as I'm concerned. But one of the things that you've got to watch out for is really it boils down to this: is if you've streamed it, it will generally hold on those platforms. Like Vimeo holds onto the videos that we stream, YouTube does, Facebook does, because it was streamed live. The streaming license covers you. If it's recorded for the purposes of redistribution, it does not. So it's all done through the aspect of it's mostly like how you present the content originally. If it's done through a live stream, it's all kosher, and you're okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kevin,
Kevin, it's Sandy. I have a quick question about website. I'm working on getting a new website up and energized for our church, and I have no idea what it should cost to hire somebody. Is there somewhere I can go to figure that out, or?
That mostly that's a matter of shopping around.
Okay.
If you go to a web agency, they will 100% charge you 10 times more than anybody else. If you can find yourself a freelancer, somebody who works generally on their own, normally there's going to be some areas where the work isn't like quite as good because they can't be experts in everything, right?
Right.
So you know, the website itself will function great, but the visuals might not be, you know, like top notch. Like there's going to be trade-offs, but working with a freelancer is a far more cost affordable option rather than necessarily. And honestly, talk to the folks in your church too. And by all means, request work that they've done in the past. So that you can
did that. Yeah.
So that you can see what you're getting. Having been on both sides of that vetting procedure, you know, I can tell you that references are everything. And if they can't provide good references that you can verify, because that's the other thing, ask for contact information from those references, because somebody can say, oh yeah, I built that website, and they may not have had anything to do with it. So as part of those
that one, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and as part of those references, you know, references are key. So, Jay, I know you've tried to get in a couple of times. What's your
I did, yeah, and Sandy kind of beat me to it. We are also blowing up our website. So the question's kind of it was a cost thing. You know, what would be a good dollar amount that we should have in mind?
Yes.
If we don't want to build that mansion you talked about.
Yeah, if you don't want to build the mansion, let's put it this way: if you're working with a freelancer, you're less than I would say you're probably in the $5,000 to $6,000 range, to be fair. I know freelancers, and I myself as a freelancer outside of here, there have been websites that I've built, and it really depends on functionality, what you're building into the website. If you want the website that does all the things, like if it has the event calendar and it has the newsletter signups and it has video integration and it does this and it does, that's going to cost more, of course, right? So like you can get, it's just like if you think about it like a car, you can get the SE model, or you know, or you can get the LTZ model, right? We're talking Chevy, right? So like you can get the one that has all the options, or you can get the one that is the base model and just has power windows and, you know, an automatic transmission, right? Or you can get the one that has the screen and does all the fancy stuff, and has the backup camera, you know? So it's really like, it's really like that. It's mostly about what you're going to do with the website and how much information you're going to put on there. Like, and there's a lot, and there's also work that, as much work as you can take off of them as possible will help. If you're writing the content, and actually, you know what, one of the other files that I will include for everyone is, yes, thank you, Cheryl, for sharing that in the chat, by the way. I'll jump to that in a second. as far as though, I have a content template that I can give you as far that's like a sample of how to write content for a web page. That it's mostly for writing a blog, but it also holds true for writing content for a web page, because there are some best practices. People don't like to read, the novel when they get to a web page either. The easiest way you can do that is by breaking it into short chunks of content, headline, paragraph, and that content template shows some good examples of how to write. Like you can factor that. Like I've actually got that. Let me share. In fact, let me share my other screen again, and I'll show you some samples of that on our website. So this is the Hempfield website. Not my favorite theme in the world, right? But it's solid. So if I'm communicating information about Safe Sanctuary, and this is a section of the website that I just had to redo when I took this on, but you'll notice that it's chunk of content, some bold calls to action, right? A short bulleted list where, if you've never done Safe Sanctuary, or if you need to renew, there's, direct calls to action, and then continuing bulleted lists. These are the steps you have to take. Here's where to go to do it. Here's how to get it done. Like I've got it all mapped out so that it's easy content for people to follow. This is how you can handle content for, ideally how you would handle content about, the church. It's simple headline, paragraph, simple headline, paragraph, right? And so that's how we structure our content in a way to make sure that it's easy for people to parse, and they will actually read it, because it holds their attention just long enough and then moves to the next thing. So there's some strategies employed there as far as writing that content. So if you're writing the content, you're going to save some money. So,
Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin, this is Pastor John from Eddystone United Methodist Church in the South District. We're in the process of starting to write a new strategic plan for our church.
Okay.
And there was a lot of background noise when I was trying to follow you. It's called GLOO, GLOO.
Yeah, glue is actually how they pronounce it.
Okay, but it's GLOO.us.
That's correct.
Okay, and I guess what I didn't follow with you was, is that like a website or software?
It's a website.
It's a website. Okay. Is it free to any church, or how does it work?
They have a free component, but there are paid components. So if you want more detailed information, you can subscribe.
Okay, fair enough.
But there is information that you can access for free. It's a lot of similar information to what you can find in the Mission Insight tool. Okay. But when I went over to the new EPA UMC website, I could not find access to the Mission Insight tool, because I wasn't sure if maybe that got if we killed that or not as far as our access to it. I couldn't get in this morning when I tried. I was going to use it as a demonstration, but as far as like how we can see info.
It appeared to be some very great demographical information that you present to your church council.
Well, and that's actually all based on, like if I go to the Insights, that's Insights Plus. That's the Insights Plus is the one you have to pay for. The regular Insights, you can get your Know Your Community report, and that one's the one that's free. You can see here that this is based on a 5-mile radius around the address of the church. Obviously, for Eddystone, are you near the old Baldwin locomotive?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I used to come down there for training when I worked for Xerox years ago. So I know the area. Used to stay at that what was it? Days Inn right up the street. Yeah. Woo. Yeah, that takes me back. But that was like 25 years ago. Right there. I mean, your geographic radius is probably going to be a lot smaller, because I mean, you're right down the street then from like St. Daniel's there in Chester.
Exactly.
So like you're going to have some crossover, and I only know the area because I just brought my confirmation class down to visit St. Daniel's this past year, right before COVID hit. We were down, so I know you've got other United Methodist churches that you're going to overlap. So the last thing we want to do is step on each other's toes, right? We don't want to have two left feet, as it were, with our communication as a denomination, but recognizing that we're going to need to try and find ways for us to fit the puzzle pieces together in our communities, so that we can, and that's where having a 5 to 10 minute walking radius defined can be helpful. And that's something that the Mission Insight tool was awesome for. The Mission Insight tool was great for that, because you could put your church's address in, and then you could literally map out a 5 to 10 minute walking radius as opposed to a driving radius. You could also do driving radius, by the way, because what we found is that at least in our geography, people were willing to drive up to 20 minutes to get to a church that they liked. So, you know, being able to map out what that 20-minute radius looked like in the tool also changed where we were communicating to, because I found that there were people in the south end of the York County on the other side of the river that could get here inside of 20 minutes. That all of a sudden I was now going to reach out to, because we were within driving distance for them. And you know, even though I was stepping into Susquehanna Conference territory, and they may not like me too much for that, but
perfect. Thank you.
You know, yeah, you bet.
Kevin.
Yes.
This is Tony from Westchester.
Hey man, how's it going?
Going good. Great presentation today. Thank you. Lots of fantastic information. I'm curious, you mentioned a contact management system that you use at your church.
Yes.
We have one that sounds similar, and I've seen a demo, and I registered for it. It seems pretty robust. My question is, does yours require everyone to register for it? And if so, how did you get your folks to do that? So, you know, we're struggling with getting people to take action there.
Gotcha. I have a person who handles our welcome coordination. Like, so you're actually seeing an example of like what our info looks like. You know, just you can see, so like we've got all of that stuff tracked, is what we can track for our congregation. This is my profile course. Now, what you can see is what we do is we ask people for their information. If they have a student, for example, when they register their child, it also registers them. So we get their information in there too. And then of course, then we build households. So like when I go in and I look at mine, you can actually see my household over here on the right. And so I've got members where I've got, you know, 3-4 children, you know, and then if there's other contact information for them, we can go and you can see their email address, their phone number, because we got their mobile. One of the things that we can do is we can, you know, send various emails. And if somebody was asking for my email address a minute ago, I'm gonna tell you, it's right there on the screen. I'll let you cheat and copy that down. But I will reach out to you as well. But yeah, so we ask people for the registration info, like, but we 9 times out of 10 we enter their information into here. However, I do have other tools that I use, you know, sneaky, where if I ask people to do something like come in and register for Safe Sanctuary, if they have read the Safe Sanctuary policy and they're certifying that they've read the Safe Sanctuary policy, this form that comes up is actually tied directly into Planning Center. So if they fill out this form, it now creates a profile for them in Planning Center, and now I've got their information. So there are multiple ways for me to get people's info into the system. And if they register for an event, I've got them. If they register for, like, if they register their kids for Sunday school or youth, I've got them. So like, there's a couple different ways we can get that information in there.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Which system are you using?
Realm through ACS.
Okay. That was actually really solid. I don't have too much experience with it, but I've seen the info. It's one that I've looked at.
Well, that's what, yeah, I looked at it and said, this is fantastic. Now,
yeah.
How do we get everybody in here?
And that's honestly, that's the easiest way. If you have an old like directory, or if you have a lot of times somebody will be moving from one system to another, often they'll be like, as part of the onboarding, they'll do data migration. Like a lot of churches are coming out of Shelby. You know, like that's, and people might, I saw a couple heads nod when I said Shelby, you know, Shelby Church Management. A lot of times these companies can just take the database from Shelby and just pull it all right over so that you get everybody in. But honestly, building a couple of ways to get their info in there. Like I said, I have a welcome coordinator who goes through and her workflow is she gets cards from lists that we build every week that I've got new visitors, I've got people who have taken classes, I've got people who have safe sanctuaries policy clearances and stuff that are about due, and so we track these and then we get in touch with them, and then I can always reach out and know who they are. But yeah, so that's how I get their info in there, and then we have a plan for how we follow up with them and get to know them too, as well as how to get them. Like I've got an online spiritual gifts assessment that we ask people to take. And then we have some folks who volunteer to serve as ministry guides, really, and they help people get connected based on areas where they're gifted and interests. We help them get connected into different ministries within the church. And then that's all put into that software. Like we put that all into Planning Center.
Perfect.
Kevin.
Thank you.
Yes.
If I can go back to some of the questions about building a website, our
Sure.
church is at the almost end of having a new website designed and built for us.
Okay.
And we looked for a company to do it for us.
Okay.
And our estimates ranged from $3,000 to $5,000. And we went with a company that's going to charge us about $3,000 for the design. And then there's a monthly maintenance fee where they take care of all of the security and updating and everything. Not updating our content, but updating any system-wide things.
Okay. So the question is maintenance? I'm sorry?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah. Were you asking about maintenance or were you asking for?
No, this is provided by the company that we decided to go with.
Okay. And it's I mean, that's actually fairly normal for a company to offer maintenance.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I was I spaced out for just a second there.
Yeah.
So was it a price question?
No, I was offering what there were questions about what prices could they expect to pay.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So, I mean, companies will charge depending on what they're doing. I mean, I can tell you what my agency charges where I work at part-time. Our monthly fee ranges anywhere from like $850 a month to $3,000, depending on what we're doing.
Mhm.
The $3,000 a month fee is we're also writing content for you on a regular basis and we're optimizing your website every month. And that's more for businesses.
Yeah.
If I were doing like when I'm doing freelance work,
Mhm.
what I'm doing is I'm just going to send this out to everybody. Sorry, people have been asking for my email. There's my email out to everybody, so you now can get a hold of me. So yeah, from a maintenance perspective, I wouldn't expect more than say a couple $100 a month at most to do basic maintenance and updates. Make sure things are secure. At most. And if I were honestly, if it were me working with a church, I'm going to be doing that for as cheaply as I can, just to be kind. I would hope that they would do that for you.
Well, the company that we're working with is charging us $79 a month.
Oh, that's great.
So
what and inside of that, I'm assuming updates?
System updates, not content updates.
Right.
We'll
and that's yeah, that would be what I would expect.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty fair rate for that. That's great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I see let's see. John Lafferty, you still have your hand up. Did you have another question for me? Nope. Okay, cool. I'm just trying to work through. Jean, did you have a question? I saw your hand was raised there.
Well, I did, Kevin. This goes back a while, but I do have a lot of questions. Then I'm not going to, bombard you, but I am very concerned about licensing. And so when I, am sure that I have CLI, CV, WXYZ, what, I mean, if I some contemporary worship type of song as the wonderful band did during our time here today, do I have to specifically make sure I have permission for that specific song? Or is this giving me coverage?
Okay, so there is a database that comes along with CCLI called Song Select, which will tell you basically which songs are covered. And that website is, I'll put that in the chat here. So this is Song Select. I think it's, well, let me just double check that address. I don't want to tell you something that's not true. Okay, that is correct.
Okay.
But this website, once you have CCLI, there's this service which is called Song Select, and Song Select lets you go in and you can actually look at like the top 100 chart. You can look at all the different tunes that have CCLI numbers, and it makes it very easy to find worship music. Plus, you get all the chord charts and everything in here too, which is kind of nice. So if you have a band that's looking to play some of the songs, you know, this is a great source for the material. It's got lyrics and everything.
But the whole hymnal, then the United Methodist hymnal, that's covered, right?
Yes, that is correct. The whole
I don't
hymnal is
have to
covered by
refer
CCLI.
to, John Wesley's estate to
No,
make sure that it's okay, right?
that's
Okay.
correct.
All right.
Yeah, the UM hymnal is covered by CCLI, but that to say it is covered by CCLI. So as part of your CCLI reporting once a year, you do have to include any information on hymns that you've scheduled for worship services as part of that license. So especially the web streaming also is covered for the hymnal. Like so that license covers if you have the web streaming component, that covers the hymns as well for your web stream services. So like it's something to consider, and there are CCLI numbers associated with every hymn in the hymnal.
But just to review what I think you were saying earlier is that if we record our service for people to watch later, it's not covered. Is that what you were saying?
No. Wait, what was the question again? Can you restate that?
I'm sorry, Kevin, but I thought you were saying that if we record it, now you said for distribution.
Right.
You know,
if you're recording the service for the purposes of distributing it rather than live streaming it, that's a different purpose, and the web streaming license does not cover that. And that's why that's not okay. But if you're streaming the service to be live and the music is part of that service, that's okay, because it was a live service. I wouldn't be able to sit down and record a video that had a hymn in it and then distribute that later. You know, if I was using it as part of like a live webinar or, you know, something where it was like going to be used as part of a live thing, then that's a different story. But if it's because that's considered recorded for rebroadcast. So this is a lot of the, I am not an expert on this, but it is something, the licensing is something that you will want to talk to somebody about who is an expert. There are advisors within, I would talk to UMC Communications. They have people, the UMC Communications folks down in Tennessee will be at UMC.com. They can help you with that.
Okay.
Answering those more specific questions. Unfortunately, I'm not the answer guy on that one. I'm not gonna, you know, I'm gonna put my little legal disclaimer down here at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm just afraid of making a wrong move. Like all of a sudden, I'm all shaken up about.
No, I got you. It's not something you have to be super afraid of, but it is something you have to be considerate of, and it's one of those things too where we always want to be on the up and up. But brothers and sisters, I do want to say thank you for joining this session. It is 10:28. I have to start the next session in like a minute, so I got to get over there. But thank you for your time, and you can reach out to me at any time. Take care, and I'll be in touch with the other info that I promised. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.